12,000 years ago, an entire human world didn't just disappear. It was drowned. Not a village, not a region, an entire landscape, rivers, forests, hunting grounds, now buried beneath up to 120 meters of ocean. A landmass comparable in scale to a continent, erased so completely that most of it no longer exists on any map. And here's the part that doesn't make sense. This wasn't supposed to happen like this, because when you look at the end of the last ice age, what you expect is a slow transition, a gradual warming, a steady shift into the world we know today. That's not what the evidence shows. It shows collapse. It shows reversal. It shows a moment where multiple systems, climate, ecosystems, coastlines, break at once. So what actually happened 12,900 years ago? And more importantly, what was lost when it did? At the height of the Ice Age, the world looked completely different. Sea levels were dramatically lower, by around 120 meters. That's enough to push coastlines outward by hundreds of miles, exposing vast plains where oceans now exist. Everything you know as shallow coastal sea today was once land. Not empty land, living land. Rivers cutting through valleys, forests stretching across low plains, animals moving in massive herds, humans following them, building lives along the edges of water, exactly where we still prefer to live today. And that creates the first contradiction. If humans have always lived along coasts, and those coasts are now underwater, then where is that entire chapter of human history? Because once the water came, it didn't preserve those worlds. It erased them, turning camps into seabeds, pathways into buried sediment, and entire ecosystems into something we can barely access. But then the climate record does something even more extreme. Around 12,900 years ago, just as the planet was warming, the system snaps. In Greenland, temperatures drop sharply, by up to 10 degrees Celsius, not over centuries, within what may have been a single human lifetime, and then it stays cold for over 1,000 years, before rising again, fast. This event is called the Younger Dryas, and it creates a contradiction that still isn't fully resolved. A planet leaving an ice age suddenly returns to near glacial conditions. Why? One explanation points to massive floods of glacial meltwater disrupting ocean circulation. The system that distributes heat across the planet, it's a strong explanation, backed by real evidence. But here's where it gets worse, because at that exact moment, the disruption doesn't stay local. Across multiple regions, ice sheets destabilize, flood systems activate, environmental shifts appear in different parts of the world at roughly the same time. So what kind of event can push multiple systems at once? Because the biological record reacts too. At least 35 genera of large animals vanish from North America alone. Mammoths, mastodons, horses, camels, predators that had survived for tens of thousands of years, disappear in what geologists describe as almost instantaneous. That's not a slow decline, that's a break, and in many places the ground itself seems to record it. A dark sediment layer, often called the black mat, appears across multiple sites. Below it, Ice Age ecosystems, megafauna, human activity. Above it, a different world entirely. It looks like a line, as if the planet itself marked the moment something ended. And this is where the debate intensifies. One hypothesis suggests that fragments of a comet may have exploded over parts of the Earth, triggering shock waves, fires, and environmental collapse. Some researchers point to unusual geochemical markers found across multiple continents. Others strongly disagree, arguing the evidence is inconsistent, and that no confirmed impact crater supports the claim. So the cause remains unresolved, but the pattern does not. Something happened, and while all of this was unfolding, the sea kept rising, which brings us to one of the most revealing and unsettling pieces of this entire story, Doggerland. Today, the North Sea looks like empty space between Britain and mainland Europe, but that's an illusion, because for thousands of years, that entire region was land, not a narrow connection, a massive, living landscape, rivers winding through valleys, wetlands stretching to the horizon, forests filled with animals, and human groups moving across it for generations. And we know this is real. Fishermen have pulled mammoth bones, antlers, and worked stone tools from the seabed. Sonar mapping reveals ancient river systems still etched into the ground below the water, preserved like shadows of a lost world. That is the first reversal. What looks empty today was once alive. The second reversal is even harder to process. Doggerland didn't disappear in a single moment. It drowned slowly, meter by meter, generation by generation. Coastlines retreat, freshwater turns to salt, habitable land shrinks, settlements shift, then vanish. Within a few lifetimes, entire regions would have been unrecognizable. And then, possibly, a final catastrophe. One hypothesis suggests that the Storegga slide, a massive underwater landslide, triggered a tsunami that struck this region. Not the cause of its flooding, but potentially the final blow to a landscape already collapsing. So now the contradiction reaches its peak. We imagine early humans as simple, stable, limited. But they were living through environmental changes on a scale we struggle to imagine, adapting to moving coastlines, surviving collapsing ecosystems, watching entire regions disappear. And here is the turning point. Doggerland does not prove a lost advanced civilization. It proves something more concrete and more unsettling. It proves that entire human environments can vanish almost completely from the record. Not because they didn't exist, but because they are no longer accessible. And that changes everything, because the history we reconstruct is built on what survived above water, not on what was lost beneath it. So what does that mean? If we are already finding tools, bones, and entire landscapes under the sea, what else is still down there? How many coastal worlds, where humans actually preferred to live, are still buried beneath sediment, beyond easy reach? How much knowledge disappeared, not through destruction alone, but through simple submersion? And how much of our timeline is shaped, not by what happened, but by what remained visible? Because the end of the Ice Age didn't just reshape the planet, it reshaped the archive. It removed entire chapters of human history from the surface of the Earth. So look at the full picture one more time. A warming world destabilizes. Temperatures collapse, then surge. Multiple environmental systems shift at once. Megafauna disappear in geological instants. A distinct layer marks the boundary between two worlds. And at the same time, the oceans rise by over 100 meters, drowning vast coastal landscapes where humans lived. And somehow, even that might not be the strangest part, because science can explain the mechanisms. Ice melts, water rises, currents shift, land disappears. That part makes sense. But explanation doesn't make this smaller. It makes it harder to ignore, because we can describe what was lost, but we can't fully see it. Not anymore. Doggerland is not just a submerged landscape. It is a reminder that the past we study is incomplete by default. Prehistory isn't only buried, some of it is drowned. We understand the process, but the missing world it left behind is something we are only just beginning to imagine.